Emmanuel had played a role in, and how Emmanuel had played a role in that. And really impressed with Paul and his heart. And just I never met him in person, but I already loved the brother. Just the fact that he had me on his heart and wanted to know what the Lord was up to. But really today, gosh, it's not so much a sermon or a Bible study even. It's just me talking to y'all about what God did through you, and just to say thank you. I know oftentimes preachers like me, we like to motivate and encourage, and man, we pound the pulpit, and rightly so, right? We all need to be challenged regularly. But this is not one of those pound the pulpit moments for me. This is it's a moment of affection. It's a moment of encouragement. It's a moment of me reflecting on you, and some of you specifically. Now, some have already gone on to be with Jesus, but um, I'll just say this: I cannot overstate the impact that Emmanuel had on my life, and everything I've done since leaving is due in part to what took place during that incredibly formative season of my life. So I'm going to read a verse. Even though it's not a sermon, I can never leave the Bible out completely. And I learned that, by the way, from Emmanuel. I was a new Christian when I came there. And so my love for God's word goes back to Emmanuel all those years ago. Philippians chapter 1, beginning in verse 3. I thank my God every time I remember you. In all of my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. And I mean that. And Paul goes on in that passage and talks about the affection that he has for the Philippian Christians. And the part of that verse, though, that really struck me and I think made me think of y'all is when he said, I thank my God every time I remember you. In all of my prayers for all of you, I pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel. And here it is, from the first day until now. And I think back on those early moments of my faith. And some of you remember my testimony. I'm from Camden, Arkansas, which is a couple hours north of where you're at now. And I became a Christian in August of 1994 under some very tragic circumstances. And then I moved to Ruston, and I was on the 8th floor of Nielsen Dormitory there. And back in those days, the dorms aren't what they are now. Back in those days, it was lime green center block community showers. It was one step above a prison cell. And so I'm in the eighth floor of Nielsen. I walked on, made the football team there at Tech, wearing my blue for y'all this morning. And I didn't know any other Christians. You know, my life had just radically changed. I was dealing with all kinds of trauma. So much stuff was swirling in my heart. I didn't know how to process it, but I had my Bible and the Holy Spirit, and we just worked it out in that dorm room. But I really didn't know what church was supposed to be. I didn't know how Christians were supposed to be together. And so that's when a couple of things happened. I got invited to the Baptist Student Union. And then also through that, I made a connection with a couple of people that became very influential. One of them, Eric Geiger. Some of you will remember him. He was a youth pastor there at Emmanuel back in the day. And they invited me to Emmanuel Baptist. And so as a new Christian, I walked into that church. And so when Paul said to the Philippians, from the first day until now, well, Emmanuel wasn't there on the first day in August, but not long after that first day, I walked into Emmanuel Baptist Church. And I'll say this, you know, as a pastor and a preacher, you know, I like to think that, we like to think sometimes that people come to church because of us because of how we speak or our style or our personalities. And Dr. Hawley was there at the time, and I think he had maybe just started. I don't remember, but it was in 1994. And Dr. Hawley is a very consistent Bible teacher. And again, I really didn't have a lot to compare it to. I'd gone to church because I was, in the Bible Belt or whatever, but I didn't pay any attention to it. And Dr. Hawley took a special interest in the university students. But this is what I wanted to say to you. It wasn't so much the pastor at Emmanuel, it was the people, the men in particular, but the people. I felt so welcomed. I felt so, I felt valued. I felt seen, however you want to describe it. In some ways, it felt like home to me because of how y'all treated me, because of how you made me feel. It wasn't the programming. It wasn't the vision statement. I'm not saying those things aren't important. I'm saying it was you. It was the look in your eyes. It was when you came over to me and you shook my hand and you asked me my name. It was, and this is where it really gets down to the nitty gritty. It was going over to your houses and eating your food. Like just on a Sunday after church, you would invite us over and we'd have groups of college students going over to houses and for a home cooked meal. It was, Emmanuel became an adopted family for us, right? Because I was there and I was 2 hours away from my physical family. But Emmanuel became a spiritual family for us. I would, I'd go hunting, I'd go fishing. I remember one time I was driving a 1970 Chevy 3 on the tree. It was a green, like not a good green, but it was a 1970 green truck. And the engine blew up. And a brother from Emmanuel came over and rebuilt the engine for me. And he showed me how to do it, though. It wasn't him doing it for me. It was him showing me how to do it. And so I was handing him the wrenches. Oh my goodness. I remember the fish fries, Brother Troy Ham. He cooked the best fish I think I'd ever eaten in my life. He had it down to a science. So much happened in my life there. And I will always, always be grateful. Every time I think of you, I thank God for you. I remember I got baptized in Camden, but I had the order wrong. We believe in believers' baptism, and so I wasn't a believer when I was baptized. So I felt convicted to say, you know what, I need to be baptized after my conversion. So I was baptized there at Emmanuel, and then I got my license to ministry there at Emmanuel. And I got ordained at Emmanuel. I remember, so some of y'all came down, but I remember people, I was down there on my knees at the front, and it was a very meaningful moment for me. And brothers would come up and lay their hands on my shoulders and offer a word and a prayer. And I remember one in particular, Brother Charles Johnson, with that raspy voice of his. And he leaned down and he said, brother, as you soar on wings like eagles, never forget to fly among the sparrows. And that was back in, that's over 20 years ago. And it stuck, right? It stuck with me to say there's some wisdom in that. I want to grab a hold of that and hang on to it, So much happened there. I got my first ministry job was at Emmanuel Baptist. Because when I started at Louisiana Tech, I was in forestry for my first quarter there, because my dad was a forester, like his dad before him, and then I realized forestry wasn't what I was supposed to do, and so I went into a pre-law business management with the pre-law track, and but over the course of those years, when it was 95, 96, by the time 97 rolled around, I'm the youth pastor at Emmanuel. So I had the privilege of being mentored by my friend, Eric Geiger. And then he left, and then I kind of stepped into that role. And I remember the day where I got I was sitting there at that desk at Emmanuel, right across the street from where you're at now. And I had an LSU law school acceptance letter and a North American Mission Board application sitting side by side on my desk. And it was one of those moments, that you remember of, Lord, I thought I was going to do this, but I think you want me to do something else. So I folded up that acceptance letter. I still have it somewhere in a box in the basement. But then I filled out that North American Mission Board application, and me and Amy got married there at Emmanuel. And then in August of '99, and we moved to Winnipeg in January of 2000 as USC2 missionaries with the North American Mission Board. And I remember, let me see, we moved over to Calgary, where I was the pastor at a Filipino church, and then I was a full-time seminary student at the Canadian Southern Baptist Seminary. That's Blackaby country over there. Richard Blackaby was the president, who became a very influential person in my life. His father, Henry Blackaby, who wrote Experiencing God, recently passed away, and I believe the funeral service is today in Georgia. But then I graduated from seminary in 2006, and I flew down to Louisiana and interviewed for a job at Emmanuel Baptist Church, because me and Amy left in 1999, and then here we are in 2006, and I want to come back home, right? That was our desire, was to come back to y'all, because you were in our hearts, and it was a beautiful thought of coming back to Emmanuel Baptist after being in Canada for 6 years. I remember, talking with the committee there. I think at the time you were looking for student and recreation, and the Lord didn't open the door, right? Lord didn't open the door. We ended up going down to Hammond, where I was a BCM director there, and but all that to say, I'll say it again. I cannot overstate the impact that Emmanuel Baptist had on my life, and it wasn't, it wasn't a big moment, right? It was the cumulative effect of 1,000 ordinary moments that resulted in incredible impact. My life was changed. I came in one way, I walked out the other side more like Jesus, right? My ecclesiology, right? My ideas about church and ministry, that was the beginning, right? That was when it was first, the embryonic call of ministry. I never would have thought God would have called me to be a preacher, right? And yet I experienced that call there as I was involved at Emmanuel and the BSU. And Dr. Hawley let me preach my first sermon, and I thank the Lord that this was pre-internet. And y'all were so gracious. Oh my, some of you in the room might remember some of these early messages. Well, I didn't know what I was doing, but Dr. Hawley and some of y'all saw something in me that I'd yet to see in myself. And I remember I'd pick up the Bible, and I'd start in Genesis, and I'd move over to Psalms, and I'd come down to the book of Acts, and I'd end up in Revelation. And, I don't know, 47 minutes later, I'd been all over the place. But that was that raw gift, right? That was that early, when I was just exploring what God wanted me to do with my life. And you guys were there to help me discover it. And then I remember after those sermons, some of y'all would come up to me and you'd be so kind. Oh, I appreciate your passion, brother. That's one thing that you would say, because I'd get excited about the Lord and about the gospel. And hopefully I still do. Hopefully I always will. But you were so kind to fan that spark into a flame, to nurture that gift when it was very young, very early on. And so I just wanted to say thank you. Right. And I guess if there is a challenge in this today, I hope you're still doing what I just described, right? As far as, again, it's not having like this Promise Keepers, hey, we're going to have all the young men from ages whatever to whatever, we're going to have a special class, we're going to have, and those things aren't bad, don't get me wrong. I've been a part of a lot of that. We're going to have a retreat, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It's just being who you are. Again, it's the cumulative of 1,000 ordinary moments, when someone walks in, a younger man especially walks in, and you, as an older brother, as a spiritual father or a grandfather, you take the initiative and you walk over and you shake a hand and you say, I'm glad you're here, right? And then being willing to open up your home and your hobbies, right, to people that are away from home, and to say, hey, let me know if during the week you want to come over and wash some clothes, or if during the week you want to come over and get away for a bit, or you can study. You can come over and study if you need to, find a quiet place. If you want to come over on Sunday after church, and we'll have a good meal for you, we can hang out and fellowship. It's those things, right? And things that seem very ordinary at the time, but when you add them up at the end of the day, that's what makes the most difference in people's lives. And so that's the concluding challenge. But really, my purpose today wasn't to challenge, but to encourage, right? And to say thank you. Me and Amy was there too, and she sang a lot of. It was Brother Tom that was the music minister at the time, and Amy sang special music there at Emmanuel, and was a part of the music ministry there. And so me and Amy, we met, we fell in love, and both of us were there at Emmanuel, and you were walking alongside us. You were one step in front of us, just encouraging us to take that next step. And then when we moved to Winnipeg, you were there to send us off with love. You commissioned us. You didn't want us to go. I remember talking with Dr. Hawley saying, hey, listen, like we really want you to stay here. But we recognize that God is calling you to do something, and we want to get behind it, right? And so part of loving people is letting them leave, and that's what you did for us. You loved us, you sent us, you commissioned us, and now we're back in Winnipeg. We moved back here in December of 2016, and it's just it's hard to be this far away from home, especially as as our parents get a little older, maybe need a little bit more help. But we're trusting the Lord for that. And what, as a pastor now, we started a church here 3.5 years ago. And as a pastor now, in many ways, I'm trying to create what I am a product of. I'm trying to create for people here what I experienced there, because it's transcultural, right? Loving people, our brothers and sisters, especially younger brothers and sisters. It's not a Louisiana thing. It's not a Baptist thing. It's a Christian thing. And so thank you for being that example for me, a real life example outside of seminary of what a loving community looks like. And yeah, there's always challenges, always, right? There's always a little dysfunction in every family, and that's true spiritually as well. But my purpose today is just, when I think of, honestly, when I think back on Emmanuel, I don't think of any, I can't think of the bad things. I'm sure something happened there. And I know as a minister now, I know there was stuff behind the scenes that was going on. But when I was 18, 19, 20-year-old new Christian, all I remember is what God did. And that's what I hope happens with my life in the midst of my mistakes and my inconsistencies, that at the end of the day, people remember my love for Jesus. And so thank you for letting God use you to help me make me who I was supposed to be, who I was meant to be. So I said to Brother Paul, I said, Emmanuel will always be my home church. And I mean it, because that's where that's ground zero for me as a Christian. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I love y'all.
All right. Well, we appreciate so much, brother. You